January 3rd, 1943. 05:47 hours. Thorpe Abbotts Airfield, England. Staff Sergeant Alan Magee stood in the pre-dawn darkness, staring at the photograph in his hands. His mother, standing in front of their house in Plainfield, New Jersey, smiling. She had pressed it into his hands the day he left for training, her fingers trembling. "Come home safe, Alan. Promise me." He had promised. That was 11 months ago. Now he was 23 years old, 5 feet 9 inches tall, 148 pounds, and he knew with absolute certainty that he had lied to his mother. The photograph was creased and worn from being folded and unfolded too many times. He had looked at it before every mission. 7 missions. 7 times he had climbed into the ball turret beneath a B-17 Flying Fortress, and 7 times he had climbed back out, alive. The other ball turret gunners on the base had a saying: "If you make it to 10 missions, you might make it to 20. If you make it to 20, you might make it home." Magee had 3 missions to go before he reached 10. 3 missions before he could even begin to hope. He slipped the photograph back into his jacket pocket next to his heart and turned toward the massive shape of the bomber waiting in the darkness. The aircraft's name was painted on the nose in white letters. Snap, crackle, pop. The pilot thought it was funny. Magee did not think it was funny. Nothing about this was funny. The cold went straight through his sheepskin flight suit. England in January was a wet, bone-deep cold that made everything hurt. His hands ached. His feet were numb inside his boots. The moisture in his nose froze when he breathed. He had been stationed at Thorpe Abbotts for 3 months, and he hated every single day of it. Not because of the cold, not because of the food or the mud or the endless rain. Because every morning might be the morning he died. Behind him, other crews were preparing their aircraft. 51 B-17 Flying Fortresses would take off this morning from air bases across eastern England. The target was Saint-Nazaire, France, a submarine base. 20 German U-boats protected by concrete pens so thick that bombs could not penetrate them. The mission was to destroy everything around the pens. Make the base unusable. Intelligence said it was a strategic target. Intelligence said a lot of things. Magee did not care about strategy. His job was to climb into a metal sphere hanging beneath the aircraft, crouch in a space barely large enough for his body, and shoot at German fighters that were trying to kill him. That was all. That was everything. He walked toward Snap. Crackle, pop, his boots crunching on frozen mud, and ducked under the fuselage. There it was, the ball turret, a sphere of aluminum and plexiglass bolted to the belly of the bomber like a tumor, 4 feet in diameter. Inside that sphere, a man would crouch for 6 hours with his knees pulled up to his chest, his head tilted forward, his spine curved, unable to stand or sit or move. 250 caliber machine guns pointing forward and down, an optical gun sight between the guns, and no room for a parachute. The first time Magee had seen a ball turret back in training in Florida, the instructor had explained the procedure. If the aircraft is hit and going down, you crank the turret manually to align the exit hatch with the fuselage hatch. Then you squeeze through an opening 22 inches wide. Then you crawl into the fuselage, find your parachute, clip it on, and jump. The instructor had said this in a flat, emotionless voice, as if he were explaining how to change a tire. One of the trainees had raised his hand. "How long does that take?" The instructor had looked at him for a long moment before answering. "If the aircraft is on fire or breaking apart, It does not matter how long it takes. You will not make it out. The trainee had not asked any more questions. Magee had volunteered for ball turret gunner anyway, not because he was brave, not because he wanted to be a hero, because the Air Force needed ball turret gunners desperately, and they were offering a promotion and an extra $50 a month. $50. He had sent it home to his mother every month since he started flying combat. She did not know what he did to earn it. He had told her he was a mechanic. He told her he worked on engines. He told her he was safe. He lied about everything. The rest of the crew was already aboard. Pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, radio operator, flight engineer, 2 waist gunners, tail gunner, 9 men. Magee would make 10. They had trained together in Texas and Florida before shipping to England. They were not friends. Some crews were close, laughed together, wrote letters for each other if someone got killed. This crew was not like that. They barely spoke. They did their jobs. They tried not to think about the odds. The odds were simple. The 8th Air Force had been bombing Germany for 5 months. In that time, 188 heavy bombers had been shot down. Each bomber carried 10 men. That was 1,880 airmen. Dead, missing, captured. The numbers kept growing. Every mission, more aircraft did not come back. Every mission, empty beds in the barracks. New crews arriving to replace the ones that were gone. Magee climbed through the rear hatch and moved forward through the fuselage. The interior of a B-17 was nothing like the recruitment posters. No padded seats, no heat, no comfort. Just bare aluminum walls, exposed cables, hydraulic lines, ammunition boxes stacked everywhere. The bomb bay dominated the center of the aircraft. 24 500-pound bombs hanging in vertical racks. 12,000 pounds of high explosives. Magee squeezed past them carefully. If the aircraft took a direct hit in the bomb bay, there would be no warning, no time to react, just a flash of white light, and then nothing. His parachute was clipped to the wall near the radio room. He checked it. Straps tight. D-ring accessible. Ripcord intact. He knew it was ready. He checked it anyway. It was the only thing that could save his life if everything went wrong. Except he would not be wearing it. It would be hanging on the wall while he was crouched in the ball turret 30 feet away. If the aircraft was hit, he would have to get out of the turret, crawl back here, grab the parachute, put it on, and jump. All of that while the aircraft was burning or spinning or breaking apart. He had nightmares about it, every night, dreams where he was trapped in the turret, watching the ground rush up, unable to move, unable to scream. The engine started. Number 3 on the right wing first, then number 4 on the outer right, then number 1 on the outer left, then number 2, 4, Wright R-1820 Cyclone engines, 9 cylinders each, arranged in a radial pattern, 1,200 horsepower each, 4,800 horsepower total. The sound was a physical force. The entire aircraft shook. Magee felt it in his chest, in his teeth, in his bones. He sat on the floor near the ball turret hatch and waited. Through a small window, he could see other bombers taxiing toward the runway, a line of dark shapes moving through the pre-dawn gloom. 51 aircraft, 510 men. Some of them would not come back. That was certain. The only question was how many. Magee thought about his mother. He thought about the promise he had made. He thought about the letter he had written last night and left on his bunk. If he did not come back, someone would mail it to her. It said he loved her. It said he was sorry. It did not say what he was sorry for. She would understand. The bomber reached the runway and stopped. The engines throttled up to full power, a roar so loud that thinking became impossible. The brakes released. Snap, crackle, pop began rolling forward, slowly at first, then faster, the tail lifting, the vibration increasing until the entire aircraft was rattling like it would shake itself apart. Then the rumbling stopped, and there was only the roar of engines and the sensation of climbing. They were airborne. Magee closed his eyes. His heart was hammering. His hands were shaking. He was terrified. He had been terrified on every single mission. The fear never got better. It never got easier. Anyone who said they were not afraid was lying. The bomber climbed in a wide circle, gaining altitude, joining the formation. This took time, sometimes an hour or more. 51 bombers trying to find their assigned positions in three-dimensional space while climbing through clouds and turbulence. It required precision and constant vigilance. Magee had seen 2 bombers collide during formation assembly over England, both aircraft exploding in midair, 20 men dead in an instant, and they had not even reached the enemy coast yet. The intercom crackled. The pilot's voice, flat and emotionless as always. "Ball turret gunner, take your position." Magee stood. His legs felt weak. He moved to the hatch and opened it. Below the hatch, the ball turret hung in its retracted position, guns pointing straight down. He looked at it for a moment. The turret was a coffin. Everyone knew it. The men who flew in it did not talk about it, but they all knew. If something went wrong, there was no escape. You would die curled up like a fetus in a metal egg, watching the earth come up to meet you. He lowered himself through the hatch, feet first, feeling for the footrests inside the turret. His boots found them. He pulled himself down, curling his body to fit through the narrow opening. His shoulders barely cleared the sides. His head passed through last, tilting forward to fit between his knees. He reached up and pulled the hatch closed, sealing himself inside. The ball turret was 4 feet in diameter. Magee was 5 feet 9 inches tall. He could not stand. He could not sit properly. He crouched with his knees pulled up to his chest, his back curved into an unnatural arch, his head bent forward until his chin nearly touched his knees. The 250 caliber machine guns were mounted directly in front of his face, one on each side of the optical gun sight. His hands gripped the control handles. His feet rested on the pedals that rotated the turret. His right hand controlled elevation. His left thumb rested on the trigger. The plexiglass sphere gave him a perfect view of everything below and behind the aircraft. He could see the English Channel, gray and cold and endless. He could see the coast of England fading into mist. Ahead, the French coast was visible, a dark line on the horizon. Somewhere beyond that coast, German fighters were taking off. Somewhere beyond that coast, anti-aircraft guns were being loaded. Somewhere beyond that coast, men he had never met were preparing to kill him. Magee tried to shift his position. There was nowhere to shift. The turret held him locked in place like a straitjacket. His legs were already beginning to cramp. His spine ached. He would be in this position for 6 hours, maybe 7, maybe longer. And if something happened, if the aircraft was hit, he would have seconds to get out, seconds to crank the turret by hand because the hydraulics might be shot out, seconds to squeeze through the hatch, seconds to find his parachute, seconds that he probably would not have. He forced himself to breathe slowly. Panic would kill him as surely as German fighters. He focused on his job, watch for fighters. If they came, shoot them, that was all. Do not think about the cramps. Do not think about the cold. Do not think about the parachute hanging on the wall 30 feet away. Do not think about his mother standing in front of their house in Plainfield, waiting for a letter that might never come. The formation crossed the French coast at 10:38 hours. Immediately, black puffs of smoke began appearing in the sky around them. Flak. 88mm anti-aircraft shells exploding at preset altitudes. Each puff was a shell that had detonated, sending thousands of steel fragments in every direction. The German gunners on the ground could not see the bombers through the clouds. They were firing blind, filling the sky with shrapnel and hoping something flew into it. Magee watched the flak bursts. They were below the formation, exploding 1,000 feet too low. The Germans had miscalculated the altitude. That was good. That meant they might survive a little longer, but the gunners would adjust. They always adjusted. The next salvo would be closer. Then he saw them, small dots coming from the direction of the sun. His stomach clenched. He keyed the intercom, trying to keep his voice steady. Ball turret to crew, fighters, 12 o'clock high, estimate 20 plus. The dots grew larger. Focke-Wulf, 190s. Fast, heavily armed, flown by Luftwaffe pilots who had been killing American bombers since the raids began. They were experienced. They were good. And there were more than 20 of them. The fighters split into two groups. Half dove toward the front of the formation. Half swung wide to attack from behind. It was textbook tactics. Hit from multiple angles. Force the gunners to divide their fire. Create openings for close-range attacks. Magee had seen it before. He knew what was coming. He rotated the turret, tracking the fighters approaching from behind. They were closing fast. His hands tightened on the control handles. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. 800 yards, 700, 600. At 500 yards, he opened fire. The 250 caliber machine guns roared. 50 rounds per second from each gun. 100 rounds per second total. Tracers arced out toward the fighters, bright lines cutting through the sky. Around him, every bomber in the formation was firing. The air filled with tracers, thousands of rounds per minute. The sky turned into a web of glowing lines, all converging on the approaching fighters. The fighters did not break off. They kept coming. That was bad. That meant they were veterans. Rookie pilots would see the tracers and panic, break away too early. Veterans knew the tracers looked more dangerous than they were. At long range, the bullets spread out. Accuracy dropped to almost nothing. Veterans would ignore the tracers and press their attacks until they were close enough to make every shot count. One fighter came straight toward Magee's position. He centered the gun sight on the nose of the Focke-Wulf and held down the trigger. His tracers walked toward the fighter, closing the distance. The fighter's wings lit up. 4 20mm cannon and 2 machine guns, all firing simultaneously. Magee saw the muzzle flashes and understood with perfect clarity that bullets were now traveling toward him at a combined closing speed of over 600 miles per hour. He kept firing. There was nothing else to do. The fighter flashed past, so close that Magee could see the pilot's face through the canopy. Oxygen mask, leather helmet, goggles, a human being trying to kill him. Then the fighter was gone, diving away, and Magee was already rotating the turret, searching for the next threat. Another fighter was coming up from below at a 45-degree angle. Magee elevated the guns and fired. His tracers fell short. The fighter was climbing too fast. He adjusted, leading the target, walking his rounds up toward the nose of the aircraft. The fighter fired. Magee saw the tracers coming. For one frozen instant, he could track individual rounds, glowing projectiles growing larger, coming directly at his face. Then they arrived. The first round hit the armor plate behind his head with a sound like a hammer striking an anvil. The 20mm cannon shell punched through half an inch of hardened steel and exploded. Shrapnel tore through the turret mechanism. Hydraulic lines ruptured. Fluid sprayed across the inside of the plexiglass. The manual crank that controlled turret rotation shattered into pieces. The second round hit the right machine gun. The receiver housing exploded. The barrel bent. The gun died. The third round hit Magee in the right shoulder. It did not feel like being shot. It felt like being hit with a baseball bat swung at full force. The impact drove him sideways into the turret wall. There was no pain, just force, just shock. He looked down and saw blood pouring from his shoulder, soaking through his flight suit, running down his arm. He tried to move the arm. It did not respond correctly. Numb, heavy, wrong. A second fragment hit his right arm. A third hit his left arm. A fourth hit his right leg. All within the same second. Multiple impacts, multiple wounds, blood everywhere. He stared at his arms, trying to understand what he was seeing. Both sleeves were shredded, fabric torn, skin torn, blood pouring from wounds he could not count. He felt no pain. That was the strange thing. No pain at all, just cold. A deep, spreading cold that seemed to come from inside his body. He wondered if this was shock. He wondered if he was dying. He wondered if his mother would ever know what happened to him. The fighter was already gone, setting up for another attack. Magee looked at his guns. The right gun was destroyed. The left gun appeared intact. He pressed the trigger with his left thumb. The gun fired. 5 rounds. Then it jammed. He tried to clear it. His hands would not work properly. Too much blood. Everything was slippery. His fingers kept sliding off the charging handle. The intercom crackled. The pilot's voice, loud now, urgent. Pilot to crew. We are hit. Number 3 engine is on fire. Number 4 is losing oil pressure. We are dropping out of formation. Magee understood what that meant. A bomber that left the formation was alone. Alone meant dead. The fighters would see the crippled aircraft and converge on it like wolves on a wounded deer. A damaged bomber with no formation to protect it was an easy kill. He looked through the plexiglass dome. Below, the French countryside was visible through gaps in the clouds. The formation was continuing towards Saint-Nazaire, a massive rectangle of bombers stretching across the sky. But snap, crackle, pop was turning away, losing altitude, heading back toward the channel. The mission was over. Now survival was the only goal. Get back across the water. Get back to England. Get home. 2 Focke-Wulf 190s saw them. They banked hard and came around for another attack. Magee watched them approach. He had 1 destroyed gun, 1 jammed gun, an arm so damaged he could barely grip the controls. He could not defend himself. He could not defend his crew. He could only watch. The first fighter opened fire at 400 yards. Cannon rounds walked up the right wing, punching neat holes through the thin aluminum skin. The rounds hit fuel tanks. They hit the number 4 engine. The engine exploded in a bloom of orange fire, pieces of the cowling tearing away, flames streaming back along the wing. The second fighter attacked from directly below, coming up at the ball turret. Magee saw it coming. He could do nothing. The fighter's guns lit up. 20mm cannon rounds hit the ball turret. The plexiglass sphere shattered. Freezing air blasted into the turret at 200 miles per hour. Fragments of plexiglass hit Magee in the face, in the chest, in the arms. More blood, more wounds. He could not see properly. Everything was blurred. Everything was red. He reached up instinctively to wipe his eyes. His hand hit something. The hatch release handle. The hatch popped open. At 200 miles per hour, the slipstream caught the hatch and ripped it completely away. Magee watched it tumble away into space, falling toward the earth 21,000 feet below. He looked up through the open hatch into the fuselage. Flames. The entire midsection of the bomber was on fire. Electrical cables burning. Hydraulic fluid burning. The oxygen system had ruptured, and pure oxygen was feeding the flames, turning them white hot, the fire spreading faster than seemed possible. He knew he had to get out. The aircraft was dying. If he stayed in the turret, he would burn, or he would ride the wreckage all the way down. Either way, he would die. He had to get out, get his parachute, jump. That was the only chance. He pulled himself toward the hatch. His right arm collapsed. Too much damage. He tried with his left arm. It held. Barely. He got one hand through the hatch, gripping the edge of the opening. The slipstream was tearing at him, trying to rip him out of the turret. He held on. The aircraft exploded. Not the whole aircraft, just the bomb bay. 12,000 pounds of high explosives. 24 500-pound bombs. The fire had reached them. They detonated simultaneously in one catastrophic instant. The blast tore the B-17 apart. The wings separated from the fuselage. The tail section broke off. The nose disintegrated. The fuselage split into 3 burning pieces. Magee was thrown clear. One moment he was gripping the hatch, pulling himself up. The next moment there was nothing to grip. He was in the air, tumbling, spinning, surrounded by debris. He saw the ball turret falling separately, rotating slowly. He saw a wing with the No. 2 engine still attached, the propeller still windmilling. He saw the tail section, the American star insignia still visible, falling flat like a leaf. He looked for parachutes. He saw none. The explosion had been too fast, too violent. No one had time to jump. 9 men, his crew, all dead instantly or falling without parachutes just like him. He reached for his own parachute. His hand found nothing. He was not wearing it. The parachute was clipped to the wall inside the fuselage. The fuselage was gone, destroyed, burning pieces falling separately through the sky. His parachute was somewhere in that debris, falling, burning, gone. He was 21,000 feet above France. He was falling at 120 miles per hour. He had no parachute. His crew was dead. His aircraft was destroyed. He was bleeding from 7 wounds that he could count, and probably more that he could not. And he had approximately 90 seconds before he hit the ground. Alan Eugene Magee was 23 years old. He would never see his mother again. He would never go home to Plainfield. He would never do any of the things he had planned to do after the war. In 90 seconds, he would be dead. Everything he was, everything he had been, everything he could have been, would end. He stopped struggling. There was no point. He could not fight gravity. He could not fight physics. He was going to die. The only choice left was how he would face it. He thought about his mother. He hoped she would be all right. He hoped she would understand that he had tried. He hoped the $50 a month he had been sending home would help. He hoped she would not hate him for lying. The wind roared in his ears. The ground was rushing up. He could see roads now, fields, a town, buildings. He was going to hit one of those buildings. He was going to hit it at 120 miles per hour. His body would be destroyed. There would be nothing left to send home, nothing left to bury. He closed his eyes. He waited for the impact. He waited for the end. Alan Magee fell through the sky at terminal velocity and discovered that dying was not what he had expected. He had imagined it would be quick, a flash of light, a moment of pain, then nothing. But this was not quick. This was slow, agonizingly slow. He had been falling for 30 seconds already, and the ground was still impossibly far below. He could see the town of Saint-Nazaire spread out beneath him like a map. The streets, the buildings, the railroad yards, everything so clear, everything so detailed. He could see individual rooftops, individual windows. He was going to hit one of those buildings, and his body would shatter like glass. His mind was working with strange clarity. He could think. He could reason. He was aware of every sensation. The wind screaming past his body at 120 miles per hour. The cold. The blood still pouring from his wounds, pulled away by the slipstream before it could soak through his flight suit. The pain finally arriving, a deep throbbing in his shoulder and arms and leg that was getting worse with each second. He was tumbling. The world spun around him. Sky, ground, pieces of the B-17 falling nearby, a section of wing, part of the tail, the ball turret, his metal coffin, tumbling end over end. He wondered if his body would land near any of it. He wondered if anyone would find him. He wondered if the Germans would send his remains home or just bury him in France. His mother would get a telegram. "We regret to inform you, missing in action over France. Presumed dead." She would cry. She would blame herself for letting him go. She would keep his room exactly as he left it, waiting for him to come home, even though he never would. The thought of her sitting alone in that house, waiting, was worse than the thought of dying. 45 seconds. He had been falling for 45 seconds. How much time did he have left? He tried to calculate it. 21,000 feet. 120 miles per hour. The numbers would not come together. His brain knew the answer, but could not process it. 30 seconds? 45? A minute? Not long enough. Never long enough. He stopped tumbling. His body found a stable position, falling face down, arms outstretched, legs spread. Skydivers called it the arch position. He had never been skydiving. He had only jumped from aircraft twice during training, both times with a parachute that opened immediately. This was nothing like that. This was falling with no hope of stopping. This was watching the ground rush up, knowing there was nothing he could do. The town was much closer now. He could see people in the streets, tiny figures moving between buildings. Did they know he was falling? Could they see him? Would they run when they realized what was about to happen? Or would they just stand there and watch him die? A bird flew past him, a pigeon, gray and white. It flapped its wings and veered away, startled by this strange falling creature. Magee watched it disappear. That pigeon would live. It would fly home to its nest. It would have a normal day. He envied the pigeon. 60 seconds. 1 minute. He had been falling for 1 full minute, and he was still alive, still conscious, still falling. The terror was gone now, replaced by something else. Resignation. Acceptance. This was happening. This was real. In a few more seconds, it would be over. He thought about his father, dead 6 years now, killed in a factory accident when Magee was 17. He had gone to work one morning and never came home. One moment alive, next moment gone. Was this how his father had felt in those final seconds? That strange clarity? That awareness of time slowing down while everything rushed forward? He thought about the girl he had wanted to ask out before he enlisted. Sarah Mitchell. She lived 3 streets over. Brown hair, green eyes. Worked at the bakery on Main Street. He had walked past that bakery every day for 2 years, trying to work up the courage to talk to her. He never did. Too nervous, too afraid of rejection. Now he would never know if she would have said yes. He thought about all the things he would never do. Never finish school. Never get married. Never have children. Never see his 30th birthday. Never see the end of this war. Never stand in front of his house in Plainfield and breathe the air and know that he was home. All of it gone. All of it ending in the next few seconds. The buildings were huge now. He could see individual bricks, individual tiles on the roofs. He was directly above the railroad station, a large building with a glass skylight. The glass reflected the morning sun, bright and clear. Beautiful in a strange way. The last thing he would ever see. Time seemed to stretch. Each second felt like an hour. His heart was beating so fast it felt like one continuous vibration in his chest. His breath came in short gasps. His injured arms throbbed with each heartbeat. Blood in his eyes, blood in his mouth, the taste of copper, the smell of smoke from his burning flight suit where fragments of the explosion had scorched it. He was 50 feet above the skylight, 30 feet, 20 feet. He wanted to close his eyes. He did not want to see the impact, but he could not. His eyes stayed open, locked on the glass rushing up to meet him. 10 feet. He thought of his mother one last time. 5 feet. He hit the skylight. The glass exploded. Hundreds of panes shattering simultaneously. The sound was like a bomb going off. Magee crashed through the steel framework supporting the glass, the metal beams bending under the impact, and fell into the railroad station. He fell through air that was suddenly warm, inside air. He fell past the steel girders supporting the roof. He fell past electric lights hanging on chains. He fell past the sound of people screaming. He fell 30 feet through the interior of the station and hit the floor. His body struck the marble floor of Saint-Nazaire train station at approximately 40 miles per hour. Not 120, not terminal velocity. The glass skylight had slowed him. Not much, but enough. 40 miles per hour instead of 120. The difference between a certainly fatal impact and one that was merely catastrophic. Every bone in his body seemed to break at once. He felt his right leg snap. He felt ribs crack. He felt something tear inside his chest. The impact drove the air from his lungs. His head bounced off the marble. White light exploded behind his eyes. Pain beyond anything he had imagined. Pain that made the bullet wounds feel like nothing. And then, impossibly, he was still alive. He could not move, could not breathe, could not see properly, but he was alive. His heart was beating. His lungs were trying to pull in air. His brain was processing information. Alive. Sound returned gradually. Screaming, people shouting in French, running footsteps, voices yelling. He tried to focus his eyes. The ceiling was far above. Broken glass everywhere. A shaft of sunlight coming through the destroyed skylight. Dust floating in the light like snow. A face appeared above him. A woman, middle-aged, wearing a coat. She was screaming something in French. He did not understand French. She grabbed his hand. He felt it. He could feel her touching him. That meant his nerves were working. That meant he was not paralyzed. More faces. More people crowding around. Someone was crying. Someone was praying. He could hear the words even though he could not understand them. French voices speaking rapidly, urgently, hands touching him, checking for pulse, checking for breathing, German voices. The crowd pulled back, heavy boots on marble, sharp commands in German, soldiers, Wehrmacht, 3 of them, rifles in hand, pushing through the crowd. One of them knelt beside Magee, looked at his face, looked at his flight suit, looked at the blood. The soldier said something in German, then in broken English. "American? You American?" Magee tried to speak. His mouth would not work. His jaw felt broken. He managed to move his head. A tiny nod. The soldier stood and shouted orders. More boots, more voices. Someone was bringing a stretcher. The soldiers lifted Magee carefully, trying not to cause more damage. The pain was unbelievable. He wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. They placed him on the stretcher. Magee stared up at the destroyed skylight as they carried him toward the door. Through the jagged hole in the roof, he could see the sky. Blue sky. Clear sky. He had fallen from that sky. He had fallen 21,000 feet without a parachute. He had crashed through a glass roof. He had hit a marble floor at 40 miles per hour. And he was alive. The impossibility of it was just beginning to register in his mind. He should be dead. Every law of physics said he should be dead. Every statistic, every probability, every reasonable expectation said that a man falling from 21,000 feet without a parachute would not survive. Could not survive. But he had. The soldiers carried him out of the station into the street. Magee saw French civilians lining the sidewalks, staring. Some looked horrified. Some looked curious. A few looked sympathetic. An American airman, the enemy, but also a human being who had just fallen from the sky and somehow lived. An ambulance was waiting. German army ambulance. They loaded him into the back. A medic climbed in with him, opened a medical kit, started checking his wounds. The medic's hands were quick and professional. He cut away Magee's flight suit, exposing the bullet wounds in his shoulders and arms and leg. He pulled out gauze and began packing the wounds to stop the bleeding. The medic said something in German, then in English. "You are lucky, very lucky." Magee wanted to laugh. Lucky. He had been shot 7 times. He had fallen 4 miles from the sky. He had crashed through a roof. Every part of his body was broken or bleeding or both. But he was alive. Maybe that was luck. Maybe that was the only definition of luck that mattered. The ambulance started moving. Magee stared at the ceiling of the vehicle. White metal. A small window showing the street passing by outside. Buildings. People. Normal life continuing while he lay here bleeding. The world kept turning. The war kept going. Nothing had changed except that one American airman had survived something that should have killed him. The medic kept working, bandaging wounds, checking pulse, checking breathing, speaking in a calm voice, half German, half broken English. "You will be okay. The doctors will help you. You will survive. Survive." The word seemed impossible. Magee had spent the last 90 seconds certain he would die. Accepting that he would die, making peace with death. And now this German medic was telling him he would survive. It did not make sense. Nothing made sense. The ambulance stopped. The back doors opened. Soldiers lifted the stretcher and carried him into a building. A hospital. German military hospital. The walls were white. The lights were bright. Voices speaking rapid German. Doctors and nurses moving quickly. They took him into a room and placed him on a table. Doctors surrounded him. One of them leaned over, looked into his eyes with a small light, checked his pupils. The doctor said something to the others. They began cutting away the rest of his clothing, examining his injuries, making notes. One doctor, older than the others, with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, looked at Magee for a long moment. Then he spoke in English. "What happened to you?" Magee tried to speak. His voice was a whisper, a rasp, barely audible. "I fell." The doctor frowned. "You fell? From where?" Magee swallowed. It hurt. Everything hurt. From the sky. 21,000 feet. No parachute. The doctor stopped what they were doing. They looked at each other. One of them said something in German. The others shook their heads. The older doctor looked back at Magee. "That is not possible. No one survives a fall from that height." Magee closed his eyes. "I know." The doctor studied him. The bullet wounds. The burns from the explosion. The shrapnel embedded in his arms and chest. The broken bones. The blood. He looked at the window near the ceiling, calculating angles and distances. Then he looked at one of the other doctors and said something in German. The word unmöglich was repeated several times. Impossible. But Magee was lying on the table in front of them, breathing, heart beating, alive. Impossible, but real. The older doctor turned back to Magee. "The skylight, at the train station. That was you?" "Yes." The doctor was silent for a moment. Then he said something Magee would remember for the rest of his life. "You have used up all your luck for one lifetime. Do not waste what remains." They gave him something for the pain, an injection. The drug spread through his body like warm water. The pain receded, not gone, but distant, manageable. The room began to blur, voices fading. He tried to stay conscious, but his body would not cooperate. He had been running on adrenaline and terror for the last 15 minutes. Now that he was safe, relatively safe, his body was shutting down. His last thought before unconsciousness took him was of his mother. He was alive. Against all odds, against all reason, he was alive. Someday he would write her a letter. Someday he would tell her what happened. Someday, if he survived the war, if he survived this hospital, if he survived everything that was still to come, he would go home to Plainfield and stand in front of their house and keep the promise he had made. He would come home safe. Alan Magee closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. Alan Magee woke to pain that felt like his body was being torn apart from the inside. Not the sharp pain of being shot. Not the crushing pain of hitting the ground. This was different, worse. A deep, grinding agony that came from every broken bone, every torn muscle, every nerve that was trying to make sense of the damage. His chest felt like it was being crushed. He tried to breathe. Nothing happened. His lungs would not expand. Panic surged through him. He could not get air. He was drowning. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His body thrashed weakly against whatever he was lying on. A hand pressed firmly against his shoulder. A voice speaking German, calm, authoritative. The hand moved to his chest. He felt something shift. Suddenly air rushed into his lungs in a painful, gasping flood. The panic receded slightly. He could breathe. Barely. He opened his eyes. A face above him. A German nurse. Young, maybe 25. Brown hair pulled back. She was adjusting a tube that ran from his chest to a glass bottle on a stand beside the bed. The bottle was half full of blood-tinged fluid. She said something in German he did not understand. Then, in heavily accented English, "You must stay calm. Breathe slow. Your lung was punctured. The tube drains the fluid. It will heal. Magee tried to nod. The movement sent lightning bolts of pain through his neck and shoulders. He stopped moving. The nurse checked something on a chart at the foot of the bed, then left. Magee stared at the white ceiling and tried to understand where he was. Hospital room, clean, quiet. A window to his left showing gray morning light. Through the window, he could see a courtyard, other patients in wheelchairs, some missing legs, some missing arms. One man sat alone on a bench, staring at nothing, his face a mass of scar tissue where his eyes should have been. German soldiers, wounded from somewhere. The Eastern Front, probably. Russia. This was what war looked like after the shooting stopped. Broken men trying to remember how to be human. Magee looked down at his own body. His right leg was encased in plaster from hip to ankle. Metal rods protruded from the cast at odd angles, holding bones in place. His right arm was also in a cast, suspended by a sling attached to a frame above the bed. His left arm was heavily bandaged. His chest was wrapped so tightly he could barely move. Tubes ran from his arm to bottles hanging beside the bed. One was blood, German blood, keeping him alive. A guard sat in a chair near the door. German soldier, young, maybe 20, rifle across his lap. He was not watching Magee with hostility, just watching, making sure the prisoner did not try to escape. As if Magee could escape, he could barely breathe. He certainly could not walk. The realization settled over him slowly, like a weight pressing down. He was alive. That was the first impossible thing. He was in a German hospital. That was the second. The Germans had not shot him. They had not left him to die in the street. They had brought him here, operated on him, saved him. Why? The door opened. An older man entered. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, white coat. The same doctor from the train station. The one who had been there when they brought him in. The doctor pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. He looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes. Several days of stubble. He studied Magee for a long moment before speaking. You have been unconscious for 2 days. We were not certain you would wake. Your injuries are extensive. The doctor paused, consulting a chart. 3 broken ribs. Collapsed right lung, which we repaired. Compound fracture of the right femur in 3 places. Compound fracture of the right radius and ulna. Fractured left ankle. 28 shrapnel wounds. Severe lacerations from glass. Damage to your right eye and nose. Kidney damage. Internal bleeding that required surgery. And your right arm. The doctor looked directly at Magee. Your right arm was nearly severed, hanging by tissue and tendons. We spent 6 hours reattaching it. You will likely never have full function, but you will keep the arm. Magee's voice came out as a whisper. Why? Why what? Why save me? I am your enemy. The doctor was silent for a moment. Then he said, because you are injured. Because I am a doctor. Because I took an oath that does not distinguish between sides. He leaned back in the chair. I have been a surgeon for 23 years. I served in the last war. I have seen men survive impossible things, but I have never seen anything like you. Tell me what happened. From the beginning, Magee told him. The mission, the fighters, the explosion, being thrown clear at 22,000 feet, the 90 seconds of falling, no parachute, the skylight, the impact. When he finished, the doctor was quiet for a long time. Then, the skylight saved you. Do you understand that? The glass itself did nothing. Glass shatters easily. But the steel framework supporting the glass, dozens of metal beams crisscrossing the roof structure, acted like a web, a net. Each beam you struck absorbed energy, slowed you fractionally, not much, but enough. By the time you fell through the framework and dropped the final 30 feet to the marble floor, your velocity had decreased from terminal velocity to perhaps 60 kilometers per hour. 40 miles per hour, Magee thought. Still enough to kill. The doctor seemed to read his mind. 40 miles per hour is catastrophic, but you hit at an angle. Your body rolled. That distributed the impact force across multiple points instead of one. Your ribs broke, absorbing energy. Your femur shattered, absorbing more. Your body destroyed itself in order to survive. And somehow your skull did not fracture. Your spine did not sever. Your brain did not hemorrhage. He paused. There is no medical explanation for why you are alive. You simply are. The door opened. Another man entered. German officer, Oberst rank insignia, colonel, older, maybe 50, iron gray hair, scarred hands. He stood at the foot of the bed and studied Magee with the expression of someone examining a particularly interesting specimen. I am told you fell from 22,000 feet without a parachute. The officer's English was perfect, no accent. Is this true? Yes, sir. Remarkable. The officer moved closer. I flew in the last war. Observation balloons. I saw many men fall. None survived. Not one. He pulled the chart from the foot of the bed and read it. Ball turret gunner. The most dangerous position on a B-17. You know the statistics, yes? 1 in 4 does not return. Magee said nothing. Your aircraft was Snap, Crackle, Pop, amusing name. The officer set the chart down. We found the wreckage in La Baule-Escoublac forest. 7 bodies. We recovered them. They will be buried with military honors. We also found this. The officer pulled something from his pocket. A photograph. Creased. Worn. The photograph of Magee's mother. Magee's throat tightened. That is mine. I know. We found it in the wreckage near your ball turret position. The officer looked at the photograph. Your mother? Yes. She is waiting for you to come home. The officer handed the photograph to Magee. 7 men died in that aircraft. You did not. I do not know if that is luck or fate or God, but you survived. Remember that. The officer left. Magee held the photograph in his left hand, the only hand that could move. His mother, standing in front of their house in Plainfield, smiling, waiting for him to keep his promise. Come home safe. But he could not go home. He was a prisoner. The war was still happening, and his crew was dead. The realization hit him like a fist to the chest. 9 men had taken off from England 2 days ago. He knew their names. He knew their faces. Lieutenant James Harrison, pilot, 32 years old, married, 2 kids back in Ohio. He always complained about the English weather, said he missed snow that was actually white instead of gray. Lieutenant Robert Chen, co-pilot, 24, first-generation Chinese-American. His family owned a restaurant in San Francisco. He was proud to serve. Wanted to prove that Chinese Americans were just as loyal as anyone else. Lieutenant William Foster, navigator, 26, engaged. He showed everyone the photograph of his fiancée before every mission. Said it was good luck. Magee could see the photograph in his mind. Blonde girl, blue dress, smiling, Staff Sergeant Thomas O'Brien, radio operator, Irish, Boston accent so thick you could barely understand him, told terrible jokes that made everyone groan. But he always made people laugh, even when they did not want to. Technical Sergeant David Rodriguez, flight engineer, from Texas, quietest man on the crew, hardly ever spoke. But when something went wrong with the aircraft, he always knew how to fix it. Staff Sergeant Michael Kowalski and Staff Sergeant Anthony Benedetti, waist gunners, best friends, from the same neighborhood in Brooklyn, enlisted together, trained together, flew together, died together. Staff Sergeant Leonard Page, tail gunner, 20 years old, youngest man on the crew. He had lied about his age to enlist. Magee knew because Page had told him one night after a mission. Said his real age was 19. Said if his mother found out she would kill him. 9 men, 9 voices, 9 lives, gone in an instant when the bomb bay exploded. Magee could remember the last thing each man had said before the fighters attacked. Harrison, hold formation. Chen, flak at 11 o'clock. Foster, on target. O'Brien, fighters inbound. And then silence, and then explosion, and then nothing. Magee was the only survivor. He did not know why. There was no reason, no logic. He was not braver, not better, not more deserving. He had simply been in the right position when the aircraft exploded, or the wrong position. He did not know which. The German officer had said 7 bodies. That meant 2 others had been thrown clear like Magee. But unlike Magee, they had not fallen through a skylight. They had hit the ground at 120 miles per hour. There would have been nothing left to bury. 9 men. 9 families who would receive telegrams. We regret to inform you, killed in action over France. His mother would receive a different telegram. Missing in action. Prisoner of war. She would not know if he was alive or dead. She would wait for news that might take months to arrive. She would sit in their house in Plainfield and stare at his empty room and wonder if he was coming home. Magee closed his eyes. He wanted to write to her, tell her he was alive, tell her he was all right. But prisoners of war were not allowed to send letters immediately. The Geneva Convention had rules. He would have to wait. Weeks, maybe months. His mother would spend all that time not knowing. The door opened again. The older doctor returned. I wanted to tell you something before you are transferred. The doctor sat down. You asked why we saved you. I will tell you the truth. When the French civilians brought you into that train station, when we saw you lying there in the wreckage, half the medical staff wanted to let you die. You are the enemy. You fly bombers that drop explosives on German cities, on civilians, women, children. By all rights, we should have left you on that floor. Then why did you not? The doctor looked at him. Because I stood over that floor and I looked at you, and I did not see an enemy. I saw a 23-year-old boy with his arm nearly torn off, bleeding to death. And I remembered that I am a doctor before I am a German. So I operated on you. I reattached your arm. I repaired your lung. I kept you alive, not because you deserved it, not because you earned it, but because that is what doctors do. We heal. We do not choose who to heal based on which side they fight for. Magee did not know what to say. The doctor stood. You will be transferred tomorrow to a prisoner of war camp, Stalag Luft 17B, a camp for captured airmen. You will remain there until the war ends. How long that will be, no one knows. Months, years, but you will survive. Your wounds will heal, and when this war is over, you will go home. He paused at the door. Do not waste this gift. 9 men died. You did not. That means something. Find out what. The doctor left. That night, Magee could not sleep. The morphine helped with the pain, but it could not stop his mind from working. He stared at the ceiling and thought about everything that had happened. He had volunteered to be a ball turret gunner for $50 a month. $50 that he sent home to his mother. $50 that he thought would help her. And it had almost gotten him killed. No, it had gotten 9 other men killed. He was the one who survived. Why? He did not believe in fate. He did not believe God had chosen him to live while others died. That would mean God had chosen Harrison and Chen and Foster and O'Brien and Rodriguez and Kowalski and Benedetti and Page to die. What kind of God would do that? It was just chance, physics, probability. He had been thrown clear at the right angle. He had fallen through a skylight instead of hitting solid ground. He had landed in a way that broke his bones but not his skull or spine. Random chance. Nothing more. But the old doctor was right about one thing. 9 men had died. Magee had not. That meant he had to live for all of them. He had to survive this camp, survive the rest of the war, go home, live a life that honored the men who did not get that chance. The next morning, German soldiers came to transfer him. They lifted him onto a stretcher with surprising care, carried him out of the hospital to a waiting truck. Magee looked back at the building as they loaded him, the place where he had been saved by people who should have been his enemies. The truck drove through Saint-Nazaire. Magee saw the train station through the truck's open back, the building with the destroyed skylight. Workers were repairing it, installing new glass. In a few weeks, no sign would remain that anything had happened there. The station would look exactly as it had before a man fell from the sky and crashed through its roof. They reached another train station and carried him onto a platform where other prisoners were waiting. British soldiers, French civilians, all being transported to camps in Germany. They stared at him, at his casts, at his bandages. One British soldier, older, maybe 35, approached. "What happened to you, mate?" Magee told him. The British soldier's expression did not change. "That is not possible. No one survives a fall like that. You are mistaken. Or lying." Magee said nothing. Let him think it was impossible. Everyone thought it was impossible. It did not change what had happened. They loaded him onto a train, a boxcar with wooden benches along the walls and straw on the floor. 20 prisoners crammed into a space meant for 12, guards at each end. The train started moving. France passed by outside the small barred windows. Villages, farms, rivers, fields. A country at war. A country occupied. As the train crossed into Germany, Magee saw something through the window that made him understand what the doctor had meant. A cemetery. German military cemetery. Hundreds of white crosses. Thousands. Endless rows stretching across a hillside as far as he could see. German soldiers. Dead. Just like American soldiers. Just like British soldiers. Just like Russian soldiers. Just like everyone who died in this war. The cemetery disappeared behind them, but Magee kept seeing it. All those crosses. All those men who had not survived. Harrison and Chen and Foster and O'Brien and Rodriguez and Kowalski and Benedetti and Page would be buried somewhere in France. 9 more crosses in a different cemetery. 9 more men who would never go home. Magee had fallen 4 miles from the sky and lived. They had not. That was the only difference. Luck, chance, fate, physics. Whatever word you used, it meant the same thing. Some people lived. Most did not. Magee had lived. Now he had to figure out what to do with that impossible gift. The train rolled on through the German countryside. The other prisoners talked quietly among themselves. Magee did not join the conversation. He held his mother's photograph in his left hand and stared at it. Her face, her smile, the house in Plainfield behind her. "Come home safe," she had said. He had promised he would. The German officer had been right. 7 men died, but Magee had not. And as long as he was alive, he still had a chance to keep that promise. The war would end eventually. All wars ended. And when it did, he would go home. He would stand in front of that house. He would look his mother in the eye, and he would tell her the truth. I fell from the sky. I should have died. I did not. And I came home. Alan Eugene Magee, 23 years old, prisoner of war, closed his eyes and allowed himself to feel something he had not felt since climbing into that ball turret 3 days ago. Hope, not certainty, not confidence, just hope. The fragile, stubborn belief that maybe, somehow, despite everything, he might survive this war. He might make it home. He might get to keep the promise he made. The train carried him east toward Stalag Luft 17B, toward months or years of captivity, toward an uncertain future. But for the first time since the mission began, Magee was not thinking about death. He was thinking about survival, and that made all the difference.